Remember when American luxury meant something? When cars were unapologetically bold, dripping with chrome, and longer than your living room? The 1980s gave us automotive excess like nothing before or since. Let's count down the best. Picture this. It's 1983, and you've just closed the biggest deal of your career. The economy is roaring back to life, Wall Street is on fire, and suddenly that Mercedes in your neighbor's driveway doesn't look so impressive anymore because Detroit is fighting back, and they're fighting dirty. The 1980s were unlike anything the American auto industry had ever seen. Ronald Reagan was in the White House, money was flowing, and luxury wasn't just a want anymore, it was practically a requirement. In 1980 alone, Americans bought over 800,000 luxury vehicles, and the Big Three in Detroit were absolutely determined to keep those dollars right here at home. The Germans had been creeping in with their precision engineering. The Japanese were making noise about reliability. But American automakers, they had something else entirely. They had presence. They had style. And most importantly, they had that unmistakable sense of rolling American excess that no import could ever truly replicate. Now here's where things get interesting. This wasn't just about slapping leather seats in a bigger car and calling it luxury. No, the 1980s brought genuine technological revolution to American luxury vehicles. We're talking about the first widespread use of computer-controlled fuel injection and digital dashboards that looked like something out of a science fiction movie, ride-quality systems that could actually adapt to road conditions. Detroit was throwing everything they had at the European invasion, and some of what they created was genuinely remarkable. These cars mattered because they represented something bigger than transportation. They were rolling symbols of the American dream itself. When you pulled up in one of these machines, you weren't just arriving somewhere. You were making a statement. You were telling the world that you had made it, and you had made it the American way. So today, we're counting down the 10 best American luxury cars of the 1980s. From forgotten gems to legendary icons, we're going to explore the vehicles that defined an era of ambition, innovation, and yes, or sometimes glorious excess. Before we dive in, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help us bring you more content like this. And here's a challenge for you. Can you guess which car is going to take the #1 spot? Drop your prediction in the comments right now. All right, let's start this journey with number 10 on our countdown. Number 10, Chrysler Fifth Avenue. You know what's funny about luxury? Sometimes the most luxurious thing in the world isn't about being flashy or modern. Sometimes it's about being comfortable. Really, genuinely, sink into your seat comfortable. And that's exactly what Chrysler understood when they created the Fifth Avenue. When this car rolled off the production line in 1982, it wasn't trying to compete with European sports sedans. It wasn't trying to be cutting edge. It was trying to be the most comfortable place you could possibly sit while getting from point A to point B. And honestly, they nailed it. The Fifth Avenue was built on Chrysler's M-body platform, which sounds technical and boring until you realize what that actually meant for buyers. It meant a car that was substantial without being massive. It meant a vehicle that felt solid, planted, and reassuring on the highway. The kind of car that made you feel like nothing bad could happen to you as long as you were behind that wheel. But let's talk about that interior, because that's where the Fifth Avenue really earned its reputation. Road and Track magazine once compared sitting in a Fifth Avenue to relaxing in your grandmother's finest living room. And here's the thing, they meant it as a compliment. The cabin said comfort, warmth, and yes, the cabin said comfort, warmth, and yes, luxury. Chrysler sold these cars like crazy throughout the 80s. We're talking over 50,000 units in some years. And who was buying them? Professionals, retirees, people who had worked hard their whole lives and wanted a car that felt like a reward. The Fifth Avenue wasn't about impressing your neighbors. It was about treating yourself. The 3.7-liter slant-six engine that powered early models wasn't going to win any drag races. But that wasn't the point. The point was smooth, quiet, reliable transportation. Later models got the 5.2-liter V8, and which added some genuine muscle to the equation while maintaining that signature smoothness. Number 9. Oldsmobile 98, Regency. Now, if the Fifth Avenue was about quiet comfort, the Oldsmobile 98 Regency was about making a statement while still being comfortable. This was General Motors saying, we can do luxury too, and we can do it with style. The 98 Regency had been around in various forms since the late 1940s, but the 1980s versions? Those were something special. When Oldsmobile redesigned the car for 1985, they created what many consider the definitive American luxury sedan of the decade. Here's what made the Regency different from its competitors. It managed to feel both traditional and modern at the same time. The exterior lines were clean and elegant without being boring. The chrome accents were tasteful rather than excessive. And inside, you got this wonderful combination of plush comfort and actual technology. The Regency came standard with features that other manufacturers charged extra for. Power everything. Climate control that actually worked. A sound system that didn't make you want to roll down the windows instead. Oldsmobile understood that luxury buyers expected these things, and they delivered. But the real magic was in how the 98 drove. The 3.8-liter V6 engine was silky smooth. The suspension soaked up bumps like they didn't exist. Highway cruising in a Regency was genuinely relaxing in a way that few cars could match. You could drive for hours and step out feeling refreshed rather than exhausted. Sales figures tell the story. Oldsmobile moved hundreds of thousands of these cars throughout the decade. They competed directly with imports from Mercedes and BMW, and for many American buyers, the Regency won that competition. Why pay twice as much for a German badge when you could have this much comfort and style for less? Did your family own either of these cars? Maybe your parents drove a Fifth Avenue to work every day. Maybe your grandparents had a Regency that they kept immaculately clean in the garage. These were the cars that defined American luxury for an entire generation of buyers. Both the Fifth Avenue and the 98 Regency proved something important. American automakers could absolutely compete in the luxury market when they focused on what they did best: comfort, value, and that unmistakable feeling of driving something substantial. But these two are just the beginning. The cars coming up next pushed American luxury even further, with innovations and features that would change what buyers expected from their automobiles. Number 8. Buick Electra Park Avenue. You know what's funny about the 1980s? Everyone remembers the flashy stuff, the bright colors, the big hair, the excess. But some of the most impressive engineering of that entire decade happened quietly. No fanfare, no magazine covers, just brilliant people solving problems that most buyers didn't even know existed. And the Buick Electra Park Avenue is the perfect example of this silent revolution. See, Buick had a reputation problem heading into the 80s. People thought of them as cars for your grandfather. Comfortable, sure. Reliable, absolutely. But exciting? Not exactly. So the engineers at Buick decided to do something radical. They were going to make the most comfortable car in America, period. And they were going to use technology to do it. The Park Avenue introduced something Buick called the Grand Touring Suspension. Now, that might sound like marketing speak, but here's what it actually meant. The car could read the road. Sensors monitored everything from wheel position to body roll, and the system adjusted in real time. You'd hit a pothole that would rattle your fillings loose in any other car, and the Park Avenue just absorbed it like it never happened. But the real magic was in the cabin. Buick understood something that other manufacturers were just starting to figure out. Luxury isn't about how much leather you can stuff into a car. It's about how you feel after driving for 3 hours. The seats in the Park Avenue were designed with input from orthopedic specialists. The climate control system could maintain different temperatures for the driver and passenger. The sound insulation was so effective that engineers actually had to add subtle road noise back in because test drivers found the silence disorienting. The 3.8-liter V6 under the hood wasn't the most powerful engine you could buy. But it was smooth, incredibly smooth. Buick spent years balancing that engine, and it showed. You could set a glass of water on the dashboard at idle and not spill a drop. Doctors, lawyers, executives who spent their days making decisions loved this car because it asked nothing of them. It just worked. And here's something most people don't know. The Park Avenue was actually profitable for General Motors at a time when many luxury cars were loss leaders. Buick dealers couldn't keep them on the lot. The waiting lists stretched for months in some cities. Number 7. Lincoln Town Car Now. If you grew up in America during the 1980s, you've been in a Lincoln Town Car. You might not remember it, but trust me, you have. Weddings, funerals, proms, airport pickups. The town car was there for every important moment of American life, quietly doing its job in the background. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. The town car wasn't designed to be a limousine. It was designed to be the ultimate personal luxury car. The fact that it became the backbone of the professional transportation industry? That was almost an accident, a very profitable accident. Lincoln built the town car on what they called the Panther platform, and this platform was over-engineered in the best possible way. The frame was designed to handle hundreds of thousands of miles without complaint. The suspension geometry was set up for maximum rear passenger comfort, which meant the people in back experienced almost no road imperfections. The trunk was cavernous, big enough for golf bags, luggage, or whatever else wealthy Americans needed to haul around. The town car became so synonymous with professional transportation that by 1989, over 70% of American limousine services used them exclusively. Think about that for a moment. 7 out of every 10 limos you saw were Lincolns. That's not market share, that's market domination. But the private buyers loved them too. The town car offered something increasingly rare in the 80s, genuine body-on-frame construction with a real V8 engine. The 5-liter produced smooth, effortless power, not exciting power, not sports car power, just this endless wave of torque that made merging onto highways feel like stepping onto a moving walkway. Celebrity owners ranged from Frank Sinatra to corporate titans who appreciated the car's discretion. A town car didn't scream wealth, it whispered it. The interior was all soft leather and wood trim, and Lincoln dealers were trained to treat every customer like royalty. You didn't just buy a town car, you were welcomed into a club. Now, I want you to think about something. Close your eyes and picture these two cars. The Park Avenue with its formal roofline, the town car with that distinctive opera window. Can you see them? Can you picture exactly what they look like? That's the mark of truly iconic design. These cars defined what comfort meant for an entire generation of American drivers. But we're just getting warmed up here. The cars coming next didn't just define comfort. They changed the entire game. Number 6, Cadillac Eldorado. Now we're getting into the cars that didn't just drive down the street. They made a statement. They announced your arrival before you even stepped out of the vehicle. And the Cadillac Eldorado of the 1980s was perhaps the loudest announcement of them all. Here's the thing about the Eldorado. It had been around since 1953, evolving through various incarnations, each one reflecting the tastes and aspirations of its era. But the 1980s brought something different. General Motors downsized the Eldorado for 1979, and by the time the 80s rolled around, you had this sleek, personal luxury coupe that somehow managed to feel both modern and unmistakably Cadillac. The design team at Cadillac faced an interesting challenge. How do you make a smaller car feel just as prestigious as the land yachts of previous decades? Their answer was sharp lines, a distinctive front end, and that unmistakable Cadillac presence that made other drivers move out of your way. The proportions were different, sure, but the attitude remained intact, and Hollywood noticed. The Cadillac Eldorado appeared in over 40 major films during the 1980s, becoming visual shorthand for American success and occasionally American excess. When directors needed to show that a character had made it, or had climbed to the top, they put them behind the wheel of an Eldorado. It was casting without dialogue. The car told you everything you needed to know about who was driving it. The Biarritz trim level became particularly desirable, offering a convertible option that brought back open-air luxury motoring. Picture this: cruising down Sunset Boulevard, top down, that distinctive Cadillac hood ornament catching the California sun. That wasn't just transportation, that was a lifestyle statement. Today, collectors are rediscovering these 80s Eldorados. Clean examples, especially the convertibles, command serious attention at auctions. There's something about that era-specific styling that captures a moment in American automotive history that we simply can't replicate today. Well, number 5, Buick Riviera. If the Eldorado was about making a statement, the Buick Riviera was about making an impression. A subtle but unmistakable impression that said you appreciated design, you understood craftsmanship, and you didn't need to shout about your success. The Riviera had always been Buick's personal luxury flagship, and the 1980s versions continued that tradition with some genuinely bold design choices. The 1979 redesign brought a dramatic new look, and throughout the early 80s, the Riviera carried this distinctive, almost European-influenced aesthetic that set it apart from everything else on American roads. But then came 1986, and this is where things get interesting. Buick's design team, led by some truly visionary stylists, created what many consider one of the most distinctive American cars of the decade. The new Riviera featured a dramatically sloped rear window, smooth body sides, and a front end that looked like nothing else in the General Motors lineup. Some people loved it immediately, others needed time to appreciate what they were seeing. The thing is, the Riviera was never about following trends, it was about setting them. The designers weren't trying to copy European sports sedans or Japanese luxury cars. They were creating something uniquely American, something that reflected Buick's heritage while pushing toward the future. Inside, the Riviera offered a driver-focused cockpit that felt genuinely special. The materials, the layout, the attention to detail. This wasn't just another American car with a fancy badge. Nay, this was thoughtful design executed with real intention. The Riviera appeared in television shows and films throughout the decade, though perhaps less frequently than its Cadillac cousin. When it did show up on screen, it typically belonged to characters with refined taste, professionals who appreciated quality without needing to broadcast their wealth to everyone around them. Here's what I want to know from you. Looking at these two cars today, which design do you think holds up better? The bold, unmistakable presence of the Eldorado, or the sophisticated, almost understated elegance of the Riviera? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'm genuinely curious which direction resonates with you. Both cars developed passionate enthusiast followings that persist to this day. Riviera clubs hold regular meets, and owners share restoration tips, and clean examples trade hands among collectors who understand what these cars represented. Now, as we move into our top 5, we're entering territory where luxury met genuine innovation. These next cars didn't just look expensive, they pioneered technologies and comfort features that would eventually trickle down to every vehicle on the road. Number 4, 1985, Cadillac Seville. Now we're getting into territory where American luxury cars weren't just competing with European imports. They were trying to leapfrog them entirely. And the 1985 Cadillac Seville represents one of the boldest technological gambles General Motors ever made. This wasn't just a luxury car. This was Cadillac's declaration that the future had arrived, and it was wearing a digital dashboard. Let's talk about that dashboard for a moment. When you slid behind the wheel of an '85 Seville, you weren't greeted by traditional gauges and needles. No, you were looking at a full digital instrument cluster that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Green vacuum fluorescent displays showed your speed, fuel level, and engine status in glowing numbers that seemed impossibly futuristic. Some dealerships actually had to offer special training sessions for new owners because people had literally never seen a car with what amounted to a computer screen. Imagine buying a luxury automobile and needing a tutorial just to understand your speedometer. That's how far ahead this thing was. But the technology didn't stop at looking cool. The Seville featured Cadillac's sophisticated fuel injection system, which was revolutionary for American luxury cars at the time. While European manufacturers had been using fuel injection for years, domestic automakers were still largely relying on carburetors. The Seville changed that conversation entirely. The system delivered better fuel economy, smoother power delivery, and reduced emissions. It was the kind of engineering that made people reconsider everything they thought they knew about American cars. The ride quality was something else entirely. Cadillac's electronic level control automatically adjusted the suspension based on load and road conditions. You could throw luggage in the trunk, pick up 3 passengers, and the car would compensate without you ever noticing a difference. This was adaptive technology before anyone called it that. Now, here's where things get interesting. All this technology came with a price, and I'm not just talking about the sticker. Early adopters discovered that when these systems worked, they were magical. When they didn't work, well, you needed a technician who understood computers, not just carburetors. Some mechanics simply refused to work on them. The maintenance stories from this era are legendary, with owners either swearing by their Sevilles or swearing at them. There wasn't much middle ground. Number 3, 1984, Lincoln Continental, Mark VII. If the Seville was Cadillac's technological statement, then the 1984 Lincoln Continental Mark VII was Ford's answer, and honestly, it might have been the better response. This car didn't just embrace technology, it integrated it in ways that felt genuinely useful rather than gimmicky. The Mark VII introduced something that would change luxury cars forever: the air suspension system. Lincoln called it their automatic ride control, and it was genuinely revolutionary. Sensors monitored road conditions and adjusted the air springs in real time, providing a ride quality that traditional steel springs simply couldn't match. You could drive over railroad tracks and barely feel them. The system was so good that it influenced suspension design for decades afterward. Under the hood, things got even more interesting. The Mark VII offered the 5.0-liter V8 with electronic fuel injection, producing 200 horsepower in the LSC variant. Now, this sparked one of the great debates of the era. Cadillac had been experimenting with V6 engines to improve fuel economy, while Lincoln stuck with the V8. Purists argued endlessly about which approach was correct. The V8 crowd insisted that luxury meant power, period. The V6 supporters pointed to efficiency and the changing times. Looking back, both sides had valid points, but there's something undeniably satisfying about that V8 rumble. The Mark VII's digital instrumentation was more refined than earlier attempts. Instead of overwhelming drivers with information, Lincoln focused on clarity and usability. The electronic message center could display over 20 different vehicle status messages, alerting you to everything from low fuel to door ajar conditions. It felt helpful rather than overwhelming. The keyless entry system deserves special mention. While not the first car to offer it, the Mark VII made it feel luxurious rather than novelty. Actually, you could unlock your doors without fumbling for keys, which sounds basic now, but felt absolutely revolutionary in 1984. Reliability proved better than many expected. Ford had learned from earlier electronic experiments, and the Mark VII systems were more robust than competitors. Mechanics grew comfortable working on them, and parts remained available. Many of these cars are still running today, which says something about their engineering. These two vehicles represent a pivotal moment in American automotive history. They proved that domestic manufacturers could innovate, could push boundaries, and could compete with anyone on technology. The features they pioneered became standard across the industry. Speaking of which, do you remember your first experience with automotive technology that seemed impossibly advanced? Maybe it was a digital dashboard, or perhaps an early navigation system. Those moments when cars felt like the future had arrived. But we're not done yet. Our top two entries take everything we've discussed and elevate it even further. Number 2. The 1985 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham. Now we're in rarefied air. We're talking about a car that didn't just represent American luxury, it defined it. For an entire generation of buyers around the world, this was the car. The one that said you'd made it, the one that foreign dignitaries requested, the one that presidents rode in, and the one that came so incredibly close to claiming our top spot that the decision kept me up at night. The Fleetwood Brougham wasn't just a model name. It was a statement. Cadillac had been building Fleetwood since 1935, and by the mid-'80s, that nameplate carried 50 years of accumulated prestige. When you told someone you drove a Fleetwood Brougham, you didn't need to explain anything else. They understood immediately. The 1985 model year represented something special. This was the final year of the rear-wheel drive, full-size Fleetwood, before Cadillac downsized the model for 1986. And buyers knew it. They understood they were purchasing the last of a breed, the last connection to an era when American luxury meant size, presence, and unapologetic excess. Under that impossibly long hood sat a 5.0-liter V8 engine producing 140 horsepower. Now I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like much. But here's the thing. This car wasn't about speed. It was about effortless motion. That engine was tuned for smoothness, for silence, for the kind of refined power delivery that made acceleration feel like floating on a cloud. You didn't stomp the gas in a Fleetwood Brougham. You simply suggested forward motion, and the car obliged. The interior was where Cadillac truly separated itself from everyone else. We're talking about 45-ounce cut-pile carpeting, genuine leather seating surfaces that were hand-stitched by craftspeople who'd been doing this work for decades, burled walnut trim that came from actual trees, not some factory in Taiwan. The seats were available with 6-way power adjustment, lumbar support, and a heating system that could warm your back on the coldest Detroit morning. But the real magic was in the details most people never noticed. The way the doors closed with that distinctive Cadillac thunk, the sound-deadening materials packed into every body panel, the fact that you could hold a conversation in normal tones at highway speeds because the cabin was quieter than most living rooms. The Fleetwood Brougham became the default choice for presidential motorcades during the Reagan administration. When foreign leaders visited Washington, they rode in Fleetwoods. When corporate executives needed to impress clients, they sent Fleetwoods. When funeral homes needed to project dignity and respect, they ordered Fleetwood chassis. This wasn't just a car. It was America's official vehicle of importance. International buyers couldn't get enough of it. In the Middle East, while wealthy families ordered Fleetwoods by the dozen. In Japan, where American cars rarely succeeded, the Fleetwood Brougham developed a cult following among collectors who appreciated its uncompromising approach to luxury. European buyers who could afford anything chose Fleetwood specifically because they represented something their domestic manufacturers couldn't replicate. That uniquely American combination of size, comfort, and presence. The sales numbers reflected this dominance. Cadillac moved over 95,000 Fleetwood Broughams in 1985 alone. That's nearly 100,000 buyers who looked at everything else on the market and said, "No, I want the best." And they were willing to pay for it. A fully loaded Fleetwood Brougham could easily exceed $25,000. In 1985 money, that was serious commitment. Celebrity owners read like a who's who of American success. Frank Sinatra owned multiple Fleetwoods throughout his life. Elvis had been a devoted Cadillac man, and his influence persisted long after his passing. Business titans, entertainment moguls, and sports legends all gravitated toward the Fleetwood Brougham because it projected exactly the image they wanted. The elegance package took everything up another notch. This option added pillow-style seating with extra padding, special interior trim, and exterior badges that announced to the world you'd chosen the finest of the fine. It was luxury on top of luxury. Excess celebrating excess. So why isn't this magnificent automobile sitting in our #1 position? What could possibly surpass a car that presidents chose? That defined American luxury for the world, that represented the absolute pinnacle of what Detroit could create? The answer comes down to one thing: innovation. The Fleetwood Brougham was the perfection of an existing formula. It took everything Cadillac had learned over 50 years and executed it flawlessly. But our #1 choice did something different. It didn't just perfect the past, it invented the future. The Fleetwood Brougham was the greatest traditional American luxury car of the 1980s. No question. But the car that claimed our top spot changed what American luxury could be. It rewrote the rules entirely. And trust me, when you hear what's coming next, you'll understand exactly why this incredible Cadillac had to settle for second place. #1. The 1985 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham. And here we are, the moment you've been waiting for, the absolute pinnacle, the car that represents everything American luxury aspired to be during the 1980s. When this vehicle debuted, automotive journalists called it the finest American automobile ever built. And you know what? Decades later, that assessment still holds weight among collectors and enthusiasts who understand what true American luxury actually means. Now, I know some of you might be surprised. You might have expected something flashier, something more technologically radical. But here's the thing about the Fleetwood Brougham. It wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. It was perfecting a formula that Cadillac had spent nearly a century developing. This was traditional American luxury, executed at the highest possible level. Let's talk about what made this car so special. The 1985 model year represented the sweet spot. Cadillac had worked out all the kinks from the downsizing era. The proportions were finally right. The 5.0-liter V8 engine delivered smooth, effortless power. Not exciting power, not sports car power. The kind of power that wafted you down the highway like you were floating on a cloud made of money. The interior. Oh, the interior. We're talking about leather so soft it felt like butter. Velour options that seemed to wrap around you like a warm embrace. Wood trim that actually looked like wood. Every surface you touched communicated one simple message: you have arrived. You are successful. You deserve this. But what really set the Fleetwood Brougham apart was the ride quality. Cadillac engineers had spent decades perfecting their suspension tuning. The result was something almost magical. You could drive over railroad tracks and barely feel them. Potholes simply disappeared. It was like the car existed in its own dimension where road imperfections simply didn't matter. The competition couldn't touch it. Lincoln was making excellent cars, absolutely, but they never quite achieved that same level of isolation from the outside world. Mercedes and BMW were gaining ground in the luxury market, sure, but they offered a completely different philosophy. European luxury meant sport and precision. American luxury meant comfort and presence. And nobody did comfort and presence better than the Fleetwood Brougham. This car dominated country club parking lots. It was the vehicle of choice for successful doctors, lawyers, and business executives who wanted everyone to know they'd made it. Pulling up in a Fleetwood Brougham made a statement that no European sedan could match. It said you were American, you were successful, and you weren't apologizing for either. The cultural significance cannot be overstated. This was the car that defined what luxury meant for an entire generation. When people closed their eyes and imagined success, they pictured themselves behind the wheel of a Fleetwood Brougham. Today's collector market reflects that legacy. Clean examples command serious money. Enthusiasts seek out low-mileage survivors with original interiors. These cars have become time capsules of a specific moment in American automotive history. A moment when bigger was better, comfort was king, and Cadillac still meant something truly special. So there you have it, the 1985 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham, the ultimate American luxury car of the 1980s. Do you agree with our number one choice? What would your pick have been? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And there you have it, 10 incredible machines that defined what American luxury meant during one of the most ambitious decades in automotive history. From the timeless elegance of the Cadillac Brougham to the technological wizardry of the Buick Reatta, from the personal luxury of the Lincoln Mark series to the bold experimentation of the Chrysler Imperial, these cars shared something special. They represented a time when American automakers believed bigger was better, comfort was king, and luxury meant giving customers everything they could imagine, and then some. These weren't just cars. They were rolling statements of success, wrapped in velour and chrome, and enough buttons to confuse a NASA engineer. What made 1980s American luxury so unique was this fearless combination of traditional craftsmanship and space-age technology. These automakers weren't afraid to take risks, to push boundaries, and yes, sometimes to fail spectacularly in the process. But that's what made the era so fascinating. Today, these vehicles represent more than just transportation. They're time capsules, reminders of an era when American car companies still dreamed big and built even bigger. Whether you owned one, rode in one, or just admired them from afar, these cars left an impression that hasn't faded. So now I want to hear from you. Did your family own any of these beauties? Do you have memories of cruising down the highway in one of these land yachts? Drop your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this trip through automotive history, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. We've got plenty more classic car content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.